when I was at med school, there were lots of things I thought I might be able to do for a living apart from medicine. But when I really thought about them, for example, I'm not saying I could do, and I'm not saying that these people don't do a very complicated job, but I could have gone and read the news. That's one thing that I can see myself have been doing as a living. Or I could have, like a lot of people like this, I'm sure people watching this think, yeah, I could have been a professional skier or whatever. We've all got other things that we could do. And music, less so now, and writing are quite important to me. And in a way, this isn't the book I really wanted to write. I wanted to write something much more deep dive. But unless you're very well known, publishers don't take that kind of thing on. And I thought, and everywhere I went to, were going, why don't you seem to be good at explaining stuff. Why don't you just write a book on well-being? I was like, oh, so dull, well-being this, well-being that, because it's one of those slightly trigger words that people find irritating. And I was going, yeah, I'm like, well, I can. But anyway, I teach a course called Prescribing Lifestyle Medicine, which uses the format of what I've written in this book. And it came from my own experience of illness when I was, in fact, at the time I was doing the TED talk, because at that time I suddenly put on loads of weight. My brain wasn't working. I could barely remember the words for that TED talk. I really struggled to get through it. You won't be able to tell if you watch it. I almost died. And actually, the reason was I had this massive spike of stress. My daughter was very young and wasn't sleeping. So for 2 or 3 years, I was having hardly any sleep at night, which in itself can break people. Plus, I had this thing called dengue fever when I was traveling as a medical student in Malaysia. The three things completely just colluded, and boom, my health collapsed. It was almost like I had acute sort of dementia. My memory, every time I used to work for the BBC at that time, I was going in every week on a Wednesday. I couldn't remember my lines, and they were going, "Are you okay?" And even one line I couldn't remember or spit it out. My neck was aching so badly that I remember I couldn't turn it when I got to a give way. My joints were really inflamed, and I was really tired. I couldn't digest my food. I was getting bloating after meals. But I realized the medical model couldn't really help me, because all I would get is a bunch of labels. People would just go, maybe you're depressed, maybe you've got IBS, maybe you've got seronegative arthritis. I love that one, where nothing shows up and the rheumatologist just waits until there's positive antibodies. And I knew that wasn't the case. It took me about 6 months to figure my own sort of health out. And I came up with this thing that's the central part of the book called the health loop. Going back to how I wrote it, I just had to get it done. Unfortunately, in 2021, my dad suddenly sort of died unexpectedly. I had to move my mum, had to sell the house in Brighton, had to move my mum over to where I live. She lives a couple of miles away from me now. And all of that sort of meant I couldn't do any writing for several months. And suddenly they went, oh, your book's got to be in by March 2022. And on April the 1st, we were flying for this massive family holiday with 3 other families to Mauritius. And I thought, I've got to get this done somehow. So I asked my partners, I said, look, I need 3 weeks in one block just to write this book. And I did a bit of it first of all. And then every sort of few days, I'd send them a photo of how many words, my partners, how many words I'd done. I go, look, I've done 14,000, which is nowhere near, not even half a book. And I go, oh, I've got to 24,000, I just hammered it out. I think the other thing, Owen, and this is really key, the reason that's so easy for me to do, because you're thinking, well, you must be like, on speed or something. And it's not that. It's just my course, my podcast, my clinical work, and my book now, compared to what I was doing 15, 20 years ago, they all come from the same energy source. I'm completely aligned. Do you know what I mean? So when you're doing, a bit of voiceover work and a bit of PR work for a health company and a bit of your brain is sort of all over the place. And although it's nice to do those things and maybe earn a bit of money, and you think, oh, that's really nice, they asked me to do that, that bit of work. Actually, it's not. If it's not in that part of the Venn diagram, I normally won't bother with it, because it won't be aligned. Like I'm sure you've got friends, they've got property business on the side. That is great, but it's exhausting when you get to a certain age. I'm 50 in a couple of months' time, and it's one of those things where unless you've got people managing those things for you, which again is a luxury and a cost, you want to really do things that chime with your own values. And so all of those things are one and the same, really. They're just, do you know what I mean?